In this video, we will use Application Tool 2 to configure the Corrigo to control a ventilation system with heating, cooling and a heat exchanger. Welcome to Regin Academy. The Corrigo series are controllers for ventilation, available in 24-volt Ardo models and 230-volt Vido models. We will focus on Regin's configuration software Application Tool 2, which provides an overview of all available parameters. Application Tool 2 is available to download for free from Regin's website. It's easily found under Products, Software Tools. But you can of course also simply use the site search function to locate it. Simply click on the download link and install the software. When launched, Application Tool 2 opens a dialog where you can create an offline project, open an existing project, or search for a device via either serial connection or a network. The Apploader function can be used for just upgrading a controller. To begin with, let's not worry about connecting a controller. In Application Tool 2, we can create the configuration first, before connecting and downloading it to an actual controller. This way, we can comfortably make the configuration in advance, before heading out in the field to implement it in one or several controllers. So, let's start a new project and select the appropriate application, which software version, and which controller model we are working with. In this example, we are using a Corrigo ventilation controller model VCA283DW-4, running software version 5.0-1-18. However, if this is your first installation of Application Tool 2, no products will be available in this menu. First, you need to go to Tools and click Update from Cloud to download the necessary configuration files. Future updates can also be downloaded from here, although Application Tool 2 will notify you if any updates are available. Now, let's create a basic configuration controlling ventilation with heating, cooling and a heat exchanger. In Application Tool 2, always start with the Configuration tab. This is where a majority of the work is done, since the settings made here will define the overall configuration. Depending on which options are selected here, other parameters will be enabled for further tweaking of the system. The System menu can be left as it is by default, but let's add a controller description to make identification easier. You can also choose to change the system language, which is useful if you want alarm text to appear in a specific language. For this example, we'll leave it at the default English. Next, let's go to the Functions menu and begin our configuration. Your selections here will of course depend entirely on what type of system you are building, and more configuration settings will become available as we enable different functions. For this example, let's keep Supply Air as the temperature control type, but change the fans to manual control with 2 speed levels. Let's also scroll down a bit and enable extended operation. Scrolling further down, we can then configure the different control sequences. By default, the Corrigo is configured with 3 sequences: heating, exchanger and cooling. Sequence A is by default heating, but can be changed if necessary. For this example, we configure it as a water type heater with a temperature sensor as freeze protection. Then in sequence B, we configure it as a plate exchanger with defrosting enabled. And sequence C remains a water type cooler. Up to 10 sequences can be added, but they will all work according to the same set point. In other words, it is not possible to configure different set points for specific sequences. After sequences A to J, we then find the parameters for configuring their starting order. By default, the heating order is set to start with sequence 2, that is the heat exchanger, using the heater as the second option. The same order is by default set for the cooling. Next, we configure the temperature control. As an example, let's add 5 room temperature sensors, using the average temperature as the calculated value to control from. Let's also enable an outdoor temperature sensor. These sensors will now appear in the list of configurable inputs. Scrolling further, we can also enable changeover functions and step control sequences, as well as make adjustments to the fan control. With manual fan control and 2 speeds selected, we need to enable step control in order to make 2 digital outputs available for the fans. Since we enabled the extended operation option earlier, that function also appears in this list. Let's set the normal speed extended operation to 30 minutes, thereby enabling the option to press a button to make the fans run at normal speed for an additional 30 minutes, overriding any configured time channels. Finally, at the bottom of the page, there is a possibility to enable extra sensors, extra indications and extra inputs and outputs. In this example though, we'll just leave these options untouched. With all necessary functions enabled, it's time to configure the corresponding inputs and outputs. In the left-hand menu, we have separate sections for analog inputs and outputs and digital inputs and outputs. These will all look different depending on your configured functions, but if we look at the analog inputs, notice how we can now assign and configure the outdoor temperature sensor, the supply temperature sensor, 5 room sensors, defrosting and freeze protection, all of which were previously enabled in the Functions tab. Let's have a closer look at one setting in particular. Each post has a device variable. As configured so far, we only have the controller option available, since we are only working with a single controller. However, the Corrigo can be connected to expansion units in order to add more inputs and outputs. So, if we go to the device list and add an expansion unit as device 1, we can then go back to the analog inputs and assign a sensor to the expansion unit instead. Of course, this only becomes relevant when setting up larger systems with a large number of inputs and outputs. With that, let's leave the Configuration tab and have a look at the Time Control tab. Here we can define up to 4 periods for the different fan speeds. Which speeds are available depends on your system configuration. In this case, we have enabled low and normal speed. So let's imagine an office building where people are not present during the weekends. The highest available speed always takes priority, so let's start by setting the low speed to be always active. Then we use the time channel for normal speed to end on Fridays at 5 PM, be inactive during Saturday and Sunday, and reactivate at 5 AM Monday morning. The holiday parameter is used for red letter days or longer times of inactivity, but requires the holiday periods to be defined. This is done in the holiday period menu. Let's add May 1st, a red letter day, and 2 weeks of summer holidays in July. With that, our system is almost configured. What remains is to have a look at the set points and make adjustments if necessary. So we go to the Ventilation tab and enter the subsection Actual Set Point. When Application Tool 2 is connected to a controller, this is where we can see the current values, but our focus now is to set the desired set points. We can also make adjustments to temperature control, fan control and PID controllers. We can also track the energy consumption and Manual Auto is the section where you can override the automation and set values manually. Finally, the Status section shows us the current status of the system. So, depending on your configuration, there will be a number of parameters that you might want to adjust. As demonstrated in this video, the menu tree follows a logical layout with systems appearing depending on your configuration. However, if you have any problems finding a particular parameter, you can always use the search box to locate it. Before we download anything to a controller, don't forget to save your configuration. With a prepared save file, it's easy to then load the same configuration to another controller. We can also go to the Help menu and create a Modbus list of the configured parameters. While the full Modbus list for the Corrigo is available on Regin's website, this function will provide a shortened list with just the parameters relevant to this particular configuration. To download the configuration to a controller, let's connect a Corrigo controller via Ethernet cable. If the controller is already connected to a network, it can be found by connecting your computer to the same network. But if you don't have access to the network, simply use a direct Ethernet connection. If your connected controller is running another software version, you will be prompted to update either the controller or the tool in order to synchronize them. If you update the controller, make sure to save any configuration already on it first, since it will otherwise be overwritten. Once the connection is established, it's a simple matter to download the configuration. And with that, your Corrigo is ready to control a ventilation system. And that's it. Thank you for watching this video from Regin Academy.